The average length of gestation period for a human baby is around 280 days, aka 40 weeks, aka roughly 10 months. But for me, I felt like there's a spiritual gestation period that's intergenerational, timeless, and predestined. While I didn't know it at the time, feels like I've been preparing for the role as a birth giver and a parent since July a couple of years ago. Welcome to the Birth Education Center podcast, hosted by myself, Care Messer, an entrepreneur, birth educator, and doula. My team and I want to help you discover your options in birth and postpartum, how to find your voice, and how to use that voice to navigate our maternal healthcare system. You and your baby are not just a number. This information includes doulas too. Now let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast today. This episode is going to be a little bit different because I am circling back on Joe and Angel's birth story from last week. And I'm going to be reading the Substack articles that Angel wrote about their pregnancy, what they experienced, about special dreams they had, and the transition of saying goodbye to their old life with their obituary and coming into parenthood. There is such amazing stuff captured in these Substack articles, and I will link those below in the show notes. But I wanted to give everybody kind of a review of them. So I'm going to read them, and I hope I do it justice, Angel. Thank you for letting me try. And our next episode is going to be the birth story, and I can't wait to read that. All right, here we go. There were dreams about this before there was a positive test. In one, he was pregnant, and he was busy explaining to everyone that even though his body wasn't made for the baby, he would be able to give birth through his anus. Everyone found him incredulous, but he knew that he had a miracle. In another, I was in labor, drenched in sweat and bright lights, surrounded by clinical staff in white coats and blue scrubs. An obstetrician determined that I wasn't dilating fast enough and ushered me into an emergency C-section. I was too tired to fight, but I knew that the baby would be born with just a bit more patience. Sometime later, laying flat on a surgical table, a baby was raised above a curtain that obscured the view of my lower body. They were placed on my chest. I sobbed in shame. My cries got louder. I woke up in tears, my partner turning over to hug me. These tears continued through the first weeks of pregnancy. My partner's dream, initially a source of an inside joke between us, was now a source of resentment from me. It's not fair that you don't have to put your career on hold for this child. My breath was bitter with jealousy, a corner of my pillow soaked in tears. I cried almost every day. Sometimes out of sheer hormonal fluctuations, like when he suggested to have rice instead of noodles for dinner because it's less processed. I wanted noodles, and I lost it. And sometimes out of anger and blame. Crashing into the couch out of exhaustion every day, I was mad at my body for no longer being compatible with my ambition. I believed that being a parent would flatten me into a singular existence of living for another life, that my life as I know it would end at the same time this child was born. Yet, even with so much resistance, somewhere deep in my body knew that this child was supposed to be born, that this child and I are here to do important work together. But for a short while, I thought, let me just indulge in this tantrum. I realized that the different complaints I had about being pregnant had a shared root of resisting grief. In a world where a new life is unanimously celebrated, my grief felt dirty and shameful. I felt pressured to put up a smile every time someone congratulated me about the news. I was looking for stories of other reluctant pregnant people who looked like me, but it was hard to find. Most pregnant content featured a woman in a renovated home decorating her nursery in shades of beige and stocking their postpartum cart with nipple balm and honest diapers. There was also an abundance of polarizing and fear-based videos with titles like 55 Ways Your Child Can Suffocate in Sleep and Why Delayed Cord Clamping is Dangerous or Life-Saving. Yet knowing that my new roommate shared the same feelings with me, I thought my disgruntlement was rude and unfair to the new life growing in my belly. Once again, the only way out of this misery is likely through. I had to acknowledge the death I was experiencing in order to welcome this new life. So, I sat down with my journal and started writing an obituary, one that mourned my broken dreams and lost aspiration, that confessed my original vision for my future, which did not include raising a child. one that described short-term plans that would be canceled because of the timing of postpartum, one that held on to a certain comfort in the body and now experiencing a complete organ relocation. I wrote pages after pages of lament, read it out loud, cried for a while, took a nap. I went to bed trusting that the tears would declutter some emotional space and patiently waited for a new vision to emerge. After this, I was empty of hopes and dreams for a week or two. I felt like a vessel, a baby, ready for newfound hopefulness for my life as a parent. I thought I was done feeling sad. And then another wave hit. This time it was about my identity as a gender nonconforming person. During the first trimester, I was so caught up with just the fact that I was pregnant that I didn't have the mental capacity to deal with what it meant for me as a non-binary person to carry the cultural expectation of being a mother. But I did know that every time someone called me mama or mom, my mind would ditch my body for a split second, and after an unknown period of time, the two pieces would come back together. What was I supposed to do in that moment? Tell them about my pronouns? Tell them I didn't want to be called mama? But what else could I be called? I had no idea. I came out as non-binary, though I now prefer the term gender nonconforming, a few years ago. Without the embodiment and the gracefulness of trans, non-binary queer artists, activists, poets, liberators like Alec, Marsha, Laverne, Chi-Chi, I would not have had the courage to challenge my own assumptions and experiences about gender. Eventually, I realized that while I felt at home in this body, I didn't resonate with the idea of a woman all along. Being pregnant is like one of the most gender-typical things that we can do. This is because gender has been socialized to be defined by the reproductive organs of one's body. This is also why people have a hard time differentiating between sex and gender. One of the reasons that made me feel confident about coming out was that I simply didn't agree that my experience as a person could be captured purely through my genitals. The food I ate just now could be part of my consciousness. The people I grew up with installed my attitude. The humming stillness of meditation showed me that my energy is beyond the binary. Being non-binary to me means I honor both my hard edges and softness, and that these two are not separate, gender-specific features, but are actually interconnected and entangled with each other. I was sharing the pregnancy news with my friend when she said this. I'm curious about something, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to. I knew that what they were about to say was going to touch somewhere tender in me. Go ahead, I said. I was already feeling tender anyway. She asked, how are you feeling with the pregnancy given you're non-binary? Up until this point, I felt privileged to be able to carry and nurture a life to be born. I remember that each gender doesn't have to look or behave a certain way. Regardless of my gender identity, I can be whoever I want to be, dress however I like, use whatever pronouns I desire. Other than that, I was mentally prepared to forgive and let go when folks misgender me, an occasion of which the frequency was sure to increase. I thought, what people thought about me was not part of my worries. I had a whole embryo to grow. Since then, curious people would ask questions like, how did you get pregnant? Wouldn't this, as in my gender identity, confuse your child? Is your partner okay about this? Less thoughtful people would say things like, just wait until your kid goes to school, and then it all goes out the door. The most disheartening experiences happened in the clinical setting. I was she/heard in every medical room. The way I was treated by the staff made me feel like I didn't really matter to them. What mattered were compliance and protocol. Each time it happened, I was too overwhelmed to say anything. The sterile setting already had me stressed out. My body was also going through a total renovation. And now I have to advocate for myself? This just seemed like a lot. I just wanted things to be easy, and I thought the easiest thing is to let things slide. It wasn't until one day my friend introduced me to a queer gender parent that I was able to process all of this. As she spoke about how her partner advocated for her during medical appointments, my chest started to quiver. Warm tears were gushing out of my eyes. All the ways in which I had been folding myself into the gender binary out of convenience were actually suffocating me. I realized that I didn't have to set aside what felt true to me in order to get care. Plus, soon I have a life that will watch and copy everything I do. As a parent, I need to live my life in full alignment as a role model. It was embarrassing to cry so hard during a phone call with somebody I barely met. But she was so kind to hold space for me and offered me more stories of trans and gender fabulous parenting life. In one, the family used the name Pom Pom, a combination of mom and pop, instead of mom or dad. I liked it immediately. I wanted to be mom and dad and something else, something fluffy and cute and encouraging, like a pom pom. Support heals. That phone call changed my life. It gave me the right words to say when folks called me mom. It helped me to have a conversation with my partner about being more proactive about correcting folks when they misgender me. I felt like a new person. I felt like all parts of me had finally arrived. The average length of gestation period for a human baby is around 280 days, aka 40 weeks, aka roughly 10 months. But for me, I felt like there's a spiritual gestation period that's intergenerational, timeless, and predestined. While I didn't know it at the time, feels like I've been preparing for the role as a birth giver and a parent since July a couple of years ago. For my birthday that year, I spent it in silence at Spirit Rock, practicing with Vipassana teachers like Kamala Masters, Joseph Goldstein, and a team of insight-trained teachers. I sat on the Adirondack chairs by the dining hall every day after lunchtime, a cup of mint tea in my hand, sending loving kindness to the wild turkeys that would stroll by every now and then. For the first few days of the practice, we were given instructions based on various mindfulness meditation techniques to help us notice the moment-to-moment experiences as they arise. A few days into the retreat, I could clearly see and feel that everything, no matter how pressing, vivid, beautiful, or agonizing it may seem at the moment, would eventually pass away. I watched most of my sensations arise and leave and felt comforted by the truth of impermanence. But after a few days of watching almost everything appear and disappear like moving clouds, a mild ache at the back of my heart between my shoulder blades started to reveal itself and stayed. The sensation was constant, muted, like a low hum at the back of my heart. I figured what arose would eventually pass away, so I just kept watching it. And sometimes I'd send it loving kindness. Every few days or so, the teachers would offer 15 minutes of one-on-one Dharma support. To be honest, I was kind of bored and thought the conversation would spice up the rhythm a little bit, so I signed up to speak with a teacher. Dara Williams's presence was strikingly warm, aware, like approachable royalty. It might sound like I'm putting her on a pedestal, but there's a certain current or energy about some Dharma teachers who are commitment to the practice. When I brought up the heartache to her, she asked me how I'd interpret it. I said that it felt like sadness, sorrow, and brokenheartedness. She smiled and asked, "What if you let go of these labels of sadness and have a conversation with it instead? It might surprise you." She continued, "This is likely ancestral and intergenerational. Go explore and come back next year to the BIPOC retreat for experienced folks." I've been connecting with my ancestors since I was a child. When my maternal grandmother died, I was a toddler. That evening, I walked over to the kitchen where my mom was and pointed upwards as if to gesture to an adult who was walking into our apartment. I then held hands with the air and walked over to the window, finally waving goodbye into the distance outside the window. I later told my mom that my grandma, her mom, was here to say goodbye. There are more memories of seeing and communicating with spirits when I was a kid. Sure, I was scared sometimes, but I never thought it was strange because Chinese folks know that kids usually have a better sense of the spirit realm. One of the employees at my parents' company had an aunt who was a medium, and we would exchange ghost stories with each other during downtime at work. But when I moved to the United States as a teenager, I was experiencing such an existential shock that I stopped having any encounters with spirits. Consciously, I stuffed down anything that's un-American to help myself acclimate to this country, and that included anything deemed paranormal. A few years ago, I binge read everything that Brian Weiss, MD, wrote. In his books, he shared stories of patients who recalled vivid details of their past lives during hypnotherapy sessions. Like the Buddhist thought of reincarnation, Weiss believed that our lives are continuous. There is no birth or death as we know it. Rather, we are spirits orbiting each other's lives over the course of lifetimes. I grew up in Hong Kong, where the belief of reincarnation and the existence of spirits are embedded in everyday culture and language. In Hong Kong, when you see people in a rush to get somewhere, you would say something to the effect of, "Laugh out loud. Are you rushing to reincarnate?" Which is basically saying that the person is in such a rush that they might get into an untimely accident and die. I didn't make it to the BIPOC retreat the year after, but I did start having conversations with the heartache. At a sit towards the end of the retreat, my paternal grandmother, who had passed when I was a tween, showed up in a rage. I won't divulge the detail of this encounter because she had since asked me not to tell everyone about this. This achiness continued, but it didn't bother me much. Several months later, I woke up one day and my back was stuck. Unable to get up or out of bed for a few days, I asked my partner to fix me. He's a naturopath doctor with chiropractic and craniosacral training. He massaged me a bit, but he held off on giving me a full treatment and referred me to a local craniosacral therapist. He said our relationship was too close for the treatment to be effective, just like how a therapist shouldn't be a therapist for their partner. I was offended because why would I pay a stranger if he could do it for free? But he's got a point, so I went. By the time I saw the craniosacral therapist, I could move again, but the pain on my back persisted and intensified. I was also experiencing a new but old symptom. Every time I cry, I'd gag and or throw up, as if something needed to be dislodged from the chest, just as I did when I was a toddler. This curious symptom made sense to me when my craniosacral therapist said at the end of our first session, "There's something in the past that's negotiating for its presence in the future, and that's what you're feeling right now." My motivation for spiritual practices is rooted in ending the suffering that's been passed down through the generations. And I felt like this heartache was an embodiment of pain that wanted to continue to live through me. But I refused. I continued to be kind to my body and spirit, getting treatments regularly and conversing with my ancestors. The back/heart pain never really went away, but it did calm down. Sometime in the fall last year, my partner and I started to have conversations about creating a family. I was resistant at first, feeling not ready for a life-altering responsibility, citing the climate crisis and capitalism as my reasons for not wanting to bring another life to the earth. But still, I thought maybe I should learn more about parenthood before completely writing it off. So I talked to a handful of parents about why they had kids. I also chatted with friends about why they would or would not want to have kids. These conversations helped me realize that the climate crisis and capitalism were just my excuses for not wanting to talk about the depression I had felt when I was a kid. Deep down, I was afraid that my child would be as sad as I was, and that it would mean that I would have failed as a parent. I broke down when I realized the truth behind my resistance. My partner held space for me, and the next day I woke up feeling hopeful for the future. Acknowledging the work both my partner and I have done for ourselves, I felt optimistic about writing a different kind of story for my family than the one I lived through. We decided, in 3 years, we will try to have a baby. Around the same time, my paternal grandmother visited me again during a meditation practice at home. This time, she was no longer resentful. Instead, she was apologetic and vulnerable. And she said to me, "I'm sorry. I wish I was the mother I wanted to be." I knelt on the floor and wept with her. I said to her, "I'm so sorry too, Grandma. I'm so sorry that you carried so much pain. I wish you didn't suffer." I haven't spoken to her since then, but I know that she's in a different space now, one that's free from the bondage of the past. Instead of seeing her alone, I started feeling more ancestors around me. They're like a spiritual support team, watching my back with reassuring smiles. You already know I got pregnant before the 3-year mark. But before I actually got pregnant, something peculiar happened. It was Thanksgiving weekend. My partner and I were visiting his family. His mom, per his request, made his favorite dessert, mung bean soup. Tempted, even though I wasn't supposed to have mung beans during my cycle, I had a small cup. His mom warned, "Mung beans are too cooling for the period. Be careful." But I thought, it's just a tiny bit. I'll be fine. Hours later, I started to feel unsettled and queasy. His mom was right. I started purging at the toilet. A quarter cup of mung bean soup turned into buckets of liquid gushing out of me. I felt like every pore of mine was puking, violently throwing things away that the body had held on to. It was as much of a physical purge as it was a spiritual cleanse. I was exhausted by the end of it. 3 weeks later, I got pregnant. It was as if Spirit was listening to our conversation and said, "Yup, They're ready for a baby, but first, they need a final purge to make space for this baby. Something tells me that this baby is a reincarnation of a healed ancestor. They'd be medicine for the world, and hopefully not mung beans. Thanks for joining us today. And remember, it's your body, your choice, and finding your voice is your power. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us in all the places, and go to birtheducationcenter.com for our blog and more online education classes. And we'll see you next week.